Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
Hi, this is Alex Stein, co-host of Mushing Radio on Dogworks Radio. We just completed our first storytelling season on the 1925 Serum Run. Almost 100 years later, the 1925 Serum Run is something that is still inspirational, amazing, and in many ways larger than life. We've gathered all of these episodes together on one page to make it easier for you to listen to them in order. Just go to dogworksradio.com/serumrun. That's SERUMRUN, no space, dogworksradio.com/serumrun. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to Dogworks Radio at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever it is that you go to listen to podcasts.
Start your day tomorrow with The Daily Dog with Michelle Forto, the morning podcast on Dogworks Radio. Apple Podcast reviewer Patty Christensen calls it funny, smart, and filled with all the info I want to know about dogs. I love this show. Wake up with The Daily Dog, available on Dogworks Radio on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your shows.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to our 2018 Iditarod coverage here on Mushing Radio. You can find us over on radiofreepalmer.org as well as 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. You can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com and anywhere you find your podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. And calling in from Los Angeles is our co-host, Alex Stein. Alex, how's it going today?
It's going great, Robert. It's an interesting day on the Iditarod Trail, to say the least. Usually there's not a lot that happens in this very early part of the race, but this year is proving to be a little bit different.
Yes, it is. There's all kinds of news that's coming out, not only about the two people that have scratched to date, fan favorite Didi Genro and Zoya Denur, but also hints and allegations of a confrontation with Wade Mars and the head drug tester for Iditarod. I guess met right before the race, and some type of argument ensued. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, apparently what happened is about 30 minutes before Wade was supposed to start, he was taken aside by the head drug tester and told that there had been some trace amounts of forbidden substances in the urine of some of his dogs. And this was Dr. Maury Craig. So it's not really clear because that was a conversation that Dr. Craig had with Wade privately, it's not clear what the prohibited substance was, whether this was an official communication or what have you. And Wade and some of the people in his camp are saying that this was, at the very least, an unprofessional way to approach him. And there was an incident report that Wade filed with Stan Hooley, who's the head of the ITC, and made an immediate request to Iditarod officials that Dr. Craig be his activities be reviewed and this incident be reviewed. So it's a troubling kind of thing because first of all, it's not clear how official this was. And I would imagine that if I were running the ITC, I would want the only type of communications with mushers to be official communications that reflected what the ITC was trying to communicate to people. And it's not clear if this really rose to that level. And if it didn't rise to that level, then it's someone trying to communicate something that is potentially upsetting or devastating or really deeply disturbing right before someone leaves for a 1,000-mile race, which is not something that should ever be happening. It's a very strange event, and a lot of things that have happened with regard to drug testing that have come out in the past year have also seemed strange. And as we've said before, it seems the need for some sort of greater transparency is really something that the ITC needs to look at.
Right. And, when you talk about official communication, I just can't imagine how some type of official communication would happen at just 30 minutes before you start the race. That's about the time, at least from a musher's perspective, that's about the time where you're harnessing up your dogs and putting booties on and doing those last-minute checks for making sure you have everything in your sled, your mandatory gear, your trail snacks, and the like. There just isn't a lot of time to sit down and talk at that point in time. And, I've been in the sort of the musher's pit, as they say, at Iditarod Restart several times, and I have never seen, the powers that be, so to speak, going up and talking to the mushers about official business at that time. Of course, there should be proper channels and outlets and times where things like that happen. So it's just really interesting why he would feel the need that he would need to come up and have a chat about it. And I was reading through the posts that were made on Wade Mars's Facebook page. His kennel page is Stump Jumpin' Kennels, and you can follow that one over on Facebook. And they had said it was borderline extortion. They were saying that if you do not corral your intentions to make the Dallas CV situation worse, we are going to make this report of a positive blood test on Wade's part public. That sure does sound like borderline extortion to me, doesn't it?
Yeah, at the very least, it's trying to strong-arm him or it's trying to intimidate him, which also is not something that should be acceptable. So, and the other thing is that apparently Dr. Craig, when he came over to Wade, there were other people with him and requested that he have a word alone with Wade. So, we don't know. Nobody else was there. And if it was any kind of official communication, I would think that you want to have somebody else there just to witness it, to corroborate what had happened and what was said, and make sure that there's no kind of misunderstanding about what's going on. So it's very disconcerting that this happened.
And what's really interesting, Alex, is why the doctor or whatever his official role is with the Iditarod, why that person would be the one that would make this type of communication. And I'm trying to put it in some type of context in another sport. I know we always compare and contrast, but I can't think of another way that a technically an employee of the ITC would come up and provide some type of communication like this when obviously that's well above and beyond his scope and practice. Why would somebody that is analyzing the reports of drug tests in a lab in Oregon be inclined to talk about somebody else's test and sort of an extortive method to keep somebody quiet nearly, 1,500, 2,000 miles away from his office?
Yeah, I would think that the appropriate person to have that conversation would either be Stu Nelson, who's the chief veterinarian, or possibly one of the heads of the ITC, either Stan Hooley or Chaz St. George. I don't think that's even an appropriate conversation for the race marshal, Mark Nordman, to have with him. I would think that would be one of the higher-ups or possibly the chief vet. Like you said, it doesn't make any sense to me either.
Well, anyway, I know it's just a developing story right now, and I wanted to make sure we talked a little bit about it here on tonight's coverage. One other thing in terms of sort of news and notes, I was reading an article that was posted on the ADN website this morning by Jake Berkowitz that was talking about the run from Rhone till Nikolai, and that's the infamous Farewell Burn area. And he had said that for the last several to many years that the top 10, somebody in the top 10 there that goes through that burn first is the eventual winner of the Iditarod. And he thinks this is a very important part of the race, even though it's within the first, 200 or 300 miles or so, that the race can really start to develop as early as now. What are your thoughts on that?
That area has been kind of a make or break area for a lot of mushers, and people sometimes will come out of there and they're very visibly shaken up, and they've barely survived it. They talk about going through it not so much as racing, but as something that you endure. So I think there is something to be said for that. We always talk about the races roughly being in thirds. There's the first third where you go over the Alaska Range and start to get up to around the Yukon River, and then there's a long middle third, and then the last third is up the Bering Coast. And there's really different types of strategies that people employ for those different parts of the race. So it certainly makes sense to me that people can come out of that area really energized and really moving forward. The other sort of thing that maybe is not talked about all that much is that, and I'm not sure how it is this year, but traditionally that area has been very, very rough. And when the trail breakers come in and they put the trail in, they try to make it as nice as they can, but as more teams go through, it gets worn down. The parts that are tricky become even trickier. So it's a totally different kind of experience for the first 5 or 10 teams to go through than for, say, the last 20 or 30 teams. So I think that Jake makes a very good case with that.
So the next thing on our agenda is to talk about the couple of scratches that have happened here early in the race. And just quickly to bring everybody up to speed on whom we talked about last night, Zoria Denur, who scratched in Squinta, just the second checkpoint on the Iditarod Trail. She made a post on her Facebook page today that she was having some heart-related problems early on in the race. Pretty much as soon as she pulled the snow hook there in the starting line, she started having a very rapid heart rate, and then she started feeling chest pains and then pain down into her arm, symptoms that sounded very much like a heart attack. And then when she did get to Squinta, she talked to a doctor there and I guess waited around for about 5 hours or so to see if things would improve, and they did not, and she was having difficulty providing for her team. And according to her post, she ended up scratching at that point and is now back in Anchorage, and was told that she has a condition called AFib, atrial fibrillation, which is going to require medication. And she also mentioned that this was going to be her last Iditarod for a while. She wants to concentrate on her family. I know she has 2 young children, and she wanted to take a little bit of a break from Iditarod. So that's sort of an update on Zoya. And then we had news this afternoon, or late this morning, that fan favorite Didi Genro scratched from the race, citing health reasons and the potential inability to take care of her team on the trail. And I know we had talked about it several times about her, wanting this to be her last race, her last Iditarod as well. Do you have any news or information about Didi Genreau's scratch from the race today?
No, I don't have anything other than what you said, but it's Didi is, in addition to being a fan favorite, it has just been, in a lot of ways, kind of the heart of the Iditarod for a very long time. She's never actually won the race, but she's come close a couple of times. She has, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 top 10 finishes. And it's, you know, she's just always been someone who seems to have time and really enjoy spending time with the fans and reaching out to the fans. And she had announced that this was going to be her last Iditarod, and I know that she was looking forward to spending time in some of the villages and saying goodbye to some of the people in the villages. And it's really sad that she that she only made it to Finger Lake, because there's a lot more of the Iditarod up ahead, and so it's too bad that she didn't get a chance to really do, you know, kind of the farewell tour aspect of her last race.
Right. One of the things that we mentioned yesterday was we were going to give our top 5 predictions for this year's race. Here we are. I guess it's the third day of the race. It started on Sunday afternoon, about 2 o'clock Alaska time. I don't think anyone up to this point has taken their 24-hour rest. And what that means is once everybody has taken their 24-hour rest, those starting times will be adjusted, and everybody will be on an even playing field, starting with Cody Straith, who will have, I guess it will be a little bit over 2-hour time addition to his 24 hours, all the way down to the last musher to leave, Hugh Neff, will come in and leave right around that 24-hour mark itself. So, Alex, I do not have the standings right now on my end. I'm currently on the road, so I don't have my laptop with me. But can you tell us where we're sitting right now, maybe who is in the top 5 in terms of the standings, and then tell us who your top 5 placements are going into this race at about the first third or so?
Yeah, so looking at the GPS right now, it looks like we have a bunch of mushers who are approaching McGrath. And so right now we've got Mitch Seavey in the lead at mile 298, followed by Yor Olsum, who is at 294, Nick Pettit, who's at 292, and then Ryan Reddington and Wade Mars are at 290, and then Aaron Burmeister, Ray Reddington Jr., Jesse Royer, Ali Zirkle, and Linwood Fielder. And I think that's the top 10, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, yeah. And then right behind them, Pete Kaiser, Richie Deal, Hugh Neff, Michelle Phillips, Kelly Maxner. So that's where we are right now. And before I give my top 5, I just want to say that I recognize that my predictions in Iditarod are always wrong. Having said that, I am going out on a limb this year again and picking Ali Zirkle to win. It feels like Alan Moore, essentially running the same team that she's running in Iditarod, just won the Quest, and it feels like this might just be her year. For number 2, I've got Nick, and if Ali doesn't win, I think Nick is sure to win. And then number 3, Mitch Seavey, followed by Jesse Royer and Wade Mars. And I think those are probably not controversial picks. My order might be a little controversial, but it certainly seems that most Iditarod watchers would have those 5 at least in the top 10.
Right. So my picks are very similar to yours, and in no particular order in my top 5. And I've said this guy's name for the last few years. Nick Pettit is doing extremely well in his mushing career. Then I do believe that Mitch Seavey will be right there as well. I also think Wade Mars will be in the top 5, and I think Jessie Royer will be the top woman finisher this year. I don't know if she will be in the top 3 places or so, but she has been doing very well the last couple of years and did very well last year, finishing with all of her 16 dogs. And in 5th place, I am going to pick Ray Reddington. So I think very similar to your picks as well. And sort of my dark horse in the whole thing would be Yor Olson. I've really been rooting that guy on for the last several years. He's sort of that slow, methodical, not slow by any means, but sort of that person that is just at that cusp who could really make a run for the money, so to speak, and it may be his year as well. And I think my top rookie this year, it has to be Jesse Holmes, and I know that he and Matt Hall were doing very well there when we spoke last night, and I think each of those guys are going to give themselves a run for the money for that top rookie honor. Who do you think, in terms of rookies, is going to really stand out this year?
I think it's definitely between Jesse and Matt, and given the two of them, I would have to give Jesse Holmes a slight edge, but it's definitely, those two are the rookies to beat. And looking at the standings right now, I think they're in like 19th and 20th place, and the next rookie is in 34th place, significantly behind. So those two, and it's an interesting thing how Iditarod characterizes rookies, because until you actually finish the Iditarod race, you are considered a rookie. So someone who enters and completes 90% of the race and then scratches is still a rookie. And then you have someone like Matt Hall, who has won the Yukon Quest, and certainly he's not inexperienced, but in Iditarod he's considered a rookie.
Right, for sure. Okay, Alex, before we run out of time tonight, we always do a musher profile, a little story, and some behind-the-scenes info about one of the mushers on the trail. And tonight it's my understanding that it's Steve Watkins. Yeah,
Steve Watkins is this is his second Iditarod. He said that it is going to be his last. He ran and completed the race in 2015, and listeners may recall that he announced in 2015 that he was going to be the first person to complete Iditarod and summit Mount Everest in the same year. So he basically finished his Iditarod run and then went off to Asia to base camp in Mount Everest and attempted a summiting of Mount Everest. He didn't actually make it. That was the year there was the gigantic earthquake that ended up killing several thousand people in the area, I believe in Nepal and maybe some in China. And so he was stuck on the mountain and was unable to complete the race up the mountain. But he, was always a very, very interesting guy, great story. He is a former Army Ranger, and he had said that when he runs dog sled races, he always runs on behalf of teachers and veterans who he feels are not given the respect that they really deserve. So when he's out on the trail, he's racing on behalf of the people who inspire kids. And he said that when he was a kid, he was very inspired by his teachers and by veterans. And he had served up in Fort Richardson for a while, so that's how he got familiar with Alaska and with dog sledding. He is taking a break from, I guess, what you could call his day job at the moment, which is running for Congress in his home state of Kansas. And he's one of 7 candidates on the Republican side. And, I've got to think that if you're looking for a great political ad, you can't go wrong with saying something to the effect of, if he's tough enough for the Iditarod Trail, he's tough enough for Kansas. So I've seen him at both the start and the restart. He seemed to have like a big cheering section and a lot of people taking his picture, and I'm thinking that some of those are going to end up in campaign ads. But it's a very, very interesting. He's an interesting and tough guy, and he said that the Iditarod is just an absolutely grueling race, which a lot of people say, but also that it takes place in a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And at the ceremonial start in Anchorage, he had like a nice private moment with Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, who was, I think, giving him some political tips, maybe not so much dog mushing tips, but they seemed to be having a really nice conversation before he started in Anchorage. So, as I said, his second race, but he said that this is going to be his last Iditarod, and he is hoping that as of November, or I guess next January, as of November, he'll be elected and then start serving the people of Kansas in January 2019.
So I assume that he is not a kennel owner if he's running currently for Congress in Kansas. So he's not a current resident of Alaska. Do you have any idea what kennel he is running for or under? Is he running a puppy team? I didn't do any research on Steve to have that info.
I believe he is running somebody's puppy team, but I'm not positive who that is. I'll have to look into it and have that information later.
Very good. So we'll apprise the people on that tomorrow for sure. So as I said, we're heading into that second third of the race, at least for the top contenders. That first wave of mushers there in the top 15 or so in this field of 67. They're going to be heading on their way towards the Yukon River, and then before that heading through the town of Iditarod, since they're running on the southern route this year, and whatnot. And then, as you mentioned, the strategy changes quite a bit. Even some folks will change sleds, and they'll drop dogs and all sorts of things in this first third to sort of make it through there. And then it's an entirely different race, at least from our coverage of it, in how things are developing over the next couple of days after that. And then we work our way through the last third, where they hit the Bering Sea coast and then run up that way and then eventually into Nome. One last thing I want to mention, Alex, is do you think that the pace this year is on par with every race in the last few years? Is it running slower, faster to you? I know you follow the trackers quite a bit. Are they doing about the same as they normally do?
It seems like they're doing approximately the same, maybe just a little bit slower from the last time they ran the southern route. But I've heard that there's a lot of sort of wet snow in the middle third of the race. So I forget who it was. It might have been Danny Seavey who reported this, or someone else like that, who said that they are expecting that the race is going to slow considerably as they move out of McGrath and up towards the Yukon. So I think that's going to be interesting. And as you mentioned, nobody's taken their 24 yet. We're going to see people start to take their 24 in the next day or two. And that's where things get fun and strategy becomes much more important.
Right. And to end our show, Alex, I just have to put you on the spot a little bit. To start the show this evening, we talked about that report with the drug testing doctor there coming up and speaking to Wade Mars. From a fan's perspective, relatively quickly, does that do anything for you? At least thinking of it in terms of being the fan, is it this sort of the news of the day, or do you think this has some real merit?
Frankly, it bothers me a lot. It bothers me that such a thing would happen. It just sort of reinforces the idea that the Iditarod needs to get their act together a little bit more and be more transparent. It's sort of being portrayed in some circles as getting back at Wade for supporting Dallas, as a way of, or perhaps as a way of people, defending Dallas and saying, well, look what even Wade is up against. The whole thing bothers me. I wish it had not happened, and I hope that some action is taken about this, because that's not the sort of thing that anyone should have to endure 30 minutes before they leave.
Right. So, guys, we will have an update if we can find it on tomorrow's show. And, again, we're looking for feedback and suggestions from our listeners. If you have questions or comments or something you would like to hear us talk about here on our daily coverage of the 2018 Iditarod, shoot us a message over on Facebook or Twitter. We'll put all those links in the show notes here. And until then, Alex, anything you want to mention in closing or potentially a topic for tomorrow's show?
There's one small story that got some coverage. I don't think we mentioned it, but it's worth mentioning. At the ceremonial start, there was a dog that belonged to the team of Lars Montan, I believe it is, that got free and was running around Anchorage. That dog was recovered and was reunited with the team several hours later. You always hate to hear stories about dogs running loose and dogs being separated from their team. So it's always good when a story like that has a happy ending.
Right, for sure. Well, Alex, it's been a pleasure this evening, and thank you all to our listeners. Again, follow us over on social media, and if you'd like to have these episodes right on your device, make sure you subscribe anywhere you find podcasts. And if you feel inclined, please leave us a review. How are we doing? Good, bad, or indifferent? Those help us out in our rankings and give us feedback on things that we could do to improve. So we look forward to any ratings or reviews, especially over on Apple Podcasts. Alex, have a good evening, and we'll talk tomorrow, okay?
Okay, thanks, Robert.
Did you know that Alaska Dog Works trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.
If you like our podcast, there are a few things you can do. You can take a couple of minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also check out all of our DogWorks Radio sponsors and promotions in our show notes. Another thing you can do is go over to Facebook, like our Facebook page, and one last thing, please tell all of your friends by spreading the word about DogWorks Radio. Thank you so much for listening to us. We really appreciate you.
DogWorks Radio is produced by Robert Forto. Logo art by Angry Squirrel Studios. DogWorks Radio is produced in conjunction with KVRF 89.7 in Palmer, Alaska.
For dog training advice, you can contact Alaska Dog Works at 907-841-1686 or visit their website at alaskadogworks.com. If you have a show idea or would like to be a guest, please contact us by sending an email to live@dogworksradio.com.